Welcome to the Help We Need podcast, where we explore topics that empower women and support their well-being. I am your host, Fumi Cameron KG, and today we will be discussing a very important topic as we enter into the new year, and that is setting realistic goals for 2025. Now, as women, this is important. So please stay tuned. Don't go away. Pay attention. When you're all over the place, you don't have time to even self-care, to appreciate what's in front of you, right? So examples that you can connect with is with your loved ones. If your child needs something, are you constantly on the phone, typing away furiously and talking and so distracted? Put the phone down. Be present in the moment. Whether it's having a conversation with your parents, whether it's having a conversation with a loved one, whether it's having a conversation with your child, put the phone down, look them in the face, have a conversation, look for times in the home. You could even set a no phone policy and put a time to it. At this time, everybody puts their phone here, right? Nobody goes on the phone. That's something we could look at. If that's an area that we feel like we really need to prioritize for this year, I would suggest that we go for it. Have conversations with the family, right? At the dining table. Let's look at one another. Let's explore the conversations. Let's be present. Even if it's in the sitting room, let's all gather together. So if that's something that resonates with you, that seems to be like, we didn't really do so well in 2024, then let's get on it and focus on that area of being present and mindful in 2024. Okay. So let's go for another aspect of emotional or mental well-being. And it's more around self-reflection, right? To understand our personal strengths, to understand our challenges. And I know sometimes, I think it's said so often that I think we don't necessarily take or are reflective of the benefits of doing that. So my suggestion would be, if you're someone that you've not really had time to really sit down and introspect or think about, what am I good at? What do I need to work on? I mean, a simple example would be, at the end of the day, think back. What did I do well today? How did I manage those conversations today? What did I not do so well today? And it's not to beat yourself down. It's just to understand yourself a bit better, because every time you do that, like, oh, it seems like I come across like an angry person. I have a short fuse. I need to work on that, because you've taken time to reflect. So you could take time at the end of the day to really, own in and understand how you showed up or you're showing up during the day, and just work at evolving and being better. So that way, when we talk about self-awareness, that's one way to be self-aware, right? And then make sure that you're making amends for the next day. You're a better version of yourself for next day, as opposed to how you behave today. So something like that. Take time to really think about how we're showing up every day. And that way we get to know ourselves better and work on being a better version of ourselves. So I think another point also to reflect on for emotional well-being would be, how are we supporting ourselves when things are really hard? And, we feel like we just don't want to talk to anybody, or we are really having difficult relationships. It could be with family, it could be with our spouses, or we're going through very difficult times. And I know, these days, the number of suicides and all that, it's alarming, right? So I think it's really important we don't get there, right? We seek support, we ask for help. There's no shame to say, I'm struggling in this aspect and I need support. Let's not wait till it's irreparable. Let's seek help. Get a mental health professional, see a therapist if you have to. This is no shame. This is you taking back yourself, taking back your life. Talk to friends, that you can trust, talk to family members, get support. If you need a mental fitness coach, enroll, invest in yourself. So if you're struggling with an issue, please do not suffer alone. Get help, ask for someone, get help. These days the channels are open. Seek for help, seek for support, talk to a friend, vent. If that makes you feel better, have someone you trust and just like pour out your heart, pour out your soul, and get advice, get good advice, get a better perspective, get a different angle to thinking through things, so you can handle the situation in a better way. In my opinion, I think this two heads are better than one is to be rewritten, and to be known as two good heads are better than one, or two good heads are better than none, because we know what happens when you have two bad heads, right? Coming together, that's an explosion. So when we are looking for support, we need to look for people that we trust that would give us sound counsel and good advice. Not what we want to hear, okay? Good advice. So that's one way to go. And for our older women on the call, you hear sometimes when people say it's lonely at the top, and we tend to use this terminology for leaders. The higher you get in the leadership hierarchy, the lonelier it gets, right? Yeah, it does really apply. And especially when we look at it from the elderly perspective, it is lonely at the top for elders, right? Because most times the kids are gone, they're all by themselves. They could be in a care facility, maybe even better because they have other older people near them that they could relate with. But for some of our older ones who necessarily are not in a care facility, or even if they're in, they still get lonely, right? So I think it's helpful this year, if you're on the call, to explore new interest, or as an elderly person, revisit old hobbies. Do you like knitting? Do you like puzzles? Do and don't do it alone, right? Get your minds engaged. Look for ways that you can interact, because to be honest, loneliness is where depression sets in, right? When you feel alone, you feel rejected, and all those thoughts come in. So it's helpful to explore ways where you're actively engaging your mind, or being in around groups or support groups, or just participating in a community agenda, where there's shared interest. So you can stay mindful and imbibe a positive mind frame. I think this will really help our elderly women on the call. So please, for 2025, if it's something that you're considering and you feel like you seem to be feeling depressed or you're alone, these are ways that you can explore to make sure that your mental wellness is where it should be. And then for exercising as well, we talked about exercise, that it does trigger certain hormones in our bodies, that help relieve stress. It goes without saying that some exercise, the fact that we are elderly doesn't mean we cannot exercise, we cannot move that body. Yes, it's not strenuous exercise, but those joints need to move. That's why they're joints. They need to move, right? So we need to try and do something, light walks in the evenings or in the mornings, some strength training, right? To even maintain mobility and reduce health risks. These are things that as elderly women, we can look at doing. And of course, we can get, medical advice, consultations to make sure we're applying the right exercise based on our body compositions. And eating healthily and drinking a lot of water. Now, for old people, when I say drinking, we're not talking about alcohol. We're not talking about sugary things like soda. Because the older you get, the more you need to stay away from things like this, right? Especially managing chronic health conditions and preventing frailty, weakness, right? There's no debate. There's no opposing conversation here. This is the way to go. So the conversations around what are you eating? What does your plate look like? What are you drinking? We need to ensure that we are following those guidelines to keep us much more healthier in 2024. So I hope this has been helpful. Okay, so let's move on to our relationship goals. And you can also refer to relationship goals as, social well-being. Now, we know that we are human beings, right? And we have been configured in a way that we need to be relatable. We need to make sure that we're engaging in conversations with others, right? So it goes without saying that as human beings, relationship, communicating, connecting with others is a critical factor in our day-to-day. So healthy relationships and emotional growth is key to overall being, right? So here are some goals that I think would be helpful. Now, if you look at it from a younger woman perspective, social skills come with us opening our mouths, right? And talking to people. Social skills come with us opening our mouths and initiating conversations, right? So we have to look at communication skills. If you're trying to not do that, you have to, right? We need to enhance our social skills. How are we communicating? Are we friendly? And things like that. And we also need to learn to set healthy boundaries. It's really important. Are we overdoing it? And do we need to slow down a bit, right? And we also need to learn to focus on our self-awareness and our personal growth as well. So that's really important when we're looking at relationship goals. So the key question is, how do we do that? So number one, I think it's important that from a relationship goal perspective, that we invest quality time in our family and friendships, right? And we can do this by, for example, if you are listening to this podcast and maybe you are married, how do you spend more time with your spouse, right? How do you take time to celebrate special occasions, wedding anniversaries, birthdays, maybe 2025 could be a year where you kind of enhance that and, make those moments special. And even if we're not married, these are things that we need to really try and enhance because it helps our relationships, right? It kind of fuses and makes it much more engaging and impactful when we take time, to make the time that we spend qualitative. We need to invest time to make sure that our times with our loved ones or significant others is impactful. It's meaningful, that those connections are getting better every single day. And, it doesn't have to be expensive because I know for some, when you hear about, going on dates or going out for dinner, it completely tunes them off, maybe because they can't afford it. But we can be creative, right? We can be creative in how we spend our quality time with our loved ones. It could be watching a favorite movie at home, getting a popcorn. It could be, you're having your friends come over, and doing some card games, but just making time to have those time invested in having good conversations with your loved ones and making a memorable time. It's something that may resonate with you for this year and maybe something that you need to work on. So take note. Then another goal I think we probably need to focus on when we talk about relationship goals or just, your social well-being is the ability to practice self-compassion and avoid comparing yourself to others, right? So I think this is something as women we do very well. We like to compare. Let me know if I'm speaking out of point, but from experience, I think I'm getting there, right? So most times we compare, and it's good to compare, right? Because in comparing, you get to enhance yourself, but there's a downside to this, right? When you keep on comparing yourself with someone else, you're checking out what are they wearing, what kind of jewelry do they have on, Oh, look at those shoes, look at those bags. And sometimes it's counterproductive, or maybe most times it is, because it builds a level of discontent, right, in what you have. And there's a tendency to start beating yourself down and not completely loving yourself because you cannot afford what you're seeing. So this year, that could be a goal you need to work on, and just make sure that you, as much as you can, you are not falling out of line. You are living within your means. You are contented with what you have. You're happy with the little you have, and making sure you don't run into debt because you're seeing this person get a new bag, get a new shoe. Try and be content with what you have. And a good way to do this is stop comparing yourself every single time with somebody else, right? Try and live within your means. So if that's something that resonates with you. You could look for ways to either cut off on that friendship if that's what's pulling you down. Stop scrolling, looking at apps that pull you in, and like, I need to get this, I need to get that. You could disable the app, disable the notifications, delete the app if that's something that would be helpful. And just try and look around, look into your wardrobe, and try and see how you can match and mix and things like this shoe could go with that, this dress could go with that. And I think sometimes we could be surprised as well that there's some things we're not wearing, we're not using. Maybe it's opportunity to share as well. So that's a goal that would work for you. This year, 2025, you need to do something about that, okay? And on the relationship goal, another goal could look like, how do we talked about asking for help, right? But how do we do that in a way that's meaningful in our culture, in our circumstances, in the current bubble that we find ourselves? How do we do that in a way that is relatable? So I talked about if you could get therapy, schedule a call with a therapist, get a professional. And if it's just having conversations with friends and loved ones, you can do that. But I think sometimes it doesn't have to be that huge for you to get the support you need or that complicated. The interactions you have with loved ones, or it could be for those of us that are Christians on the call, it could be through engaging more in fellowships or Bible groups, Bible studies, where we get to lean in a bit, get to know other believers, get to have time to read the Word of God and use those stories, right, to connect with what we're going through. And, even in those conversations, I personally have found them helpful because you get people sharing what they're going through, or when they went through a difficult time, what they did, how they were able to scale through that. That's a form of social connection where you can build up on, where you can enhance yourself, where you can support yourself. Those stories, those testimonies, they're life-changing. And there are ways through those social groups where you can enhance yourself. So don't isolate is probably what I'm trying to say. Try to look for meaningful interactions where this year you can enhance your social goals. You can enhance yourself by just connecting with people and learning, and be much more open to speak up when you need help so you can get the support that you need. Now, for older women, when we talk about relationship or social well-being goals, that could mean that maybe for some of us, right, it could mean that we look for opportunities where we deepen our relationships, right? There's so much experiences, there's so much stories that we have as elderly women that we can share with younger women. And if we don't open up and share those stories, younger women around you will never know. So how do you come up with ways where you can enhance your friendships, where you can enhance those connections And a simple way to go about it could be even in your neighborhood. Um, do you say hello to even do you know the neighbor next door? Do you have conversations with them? Or it's just you're shutting the door, they're shutting their door, even going in the elevator or the lift or just walking alongside. Some of us don't even say hello. We don't talk to people. So I think it's a good way this year, if that's speaking to you, to look for ways to be more friendly, right? Because in a sense, you get people getting to know you, you get people getting to check in on you. And that's a way to combat isolation, right? When we foster those strong social connections, either it's through family, if you've not spoken to a family member in a while, send a chat message, send something, try and ignite those connections. If it's a friend, right, try and connect with them. Or if it's even volunteering and getting into community groups, try and do that. So I would advise for those of us that are a bit elderly, and if we're looking at this goal as something we need to work on in terms of stepping out of our bubble and just making our social group a bit more bigger, this is something that we could do. So invite somebody to dinner or have them invite you and go, actually go. So that way we don't get so lonely, right? Another goal could also be participating in volunteer work. And I talked about community. And the way to get into a community is to raise your hands, sign up for something. And in volunteering, I said it before, there's a sense of purpose and belonging you get from raising your hands. You create an impact, you're giving back. And I think the beauty about giving is that you're also receiving, right? So look for volunteer work online if that's something that is relatable for you, or even within your community. So you get to mingle with others. And that's a goal that you could work on for 2025. And if that's it, come on, give it a try. So I hope that's been helpful in terms of relationship goals. Now we are moving on to financial goals, right? And it goes without saying, I think it's really important in terms of money, right? How financially healthy are you? Money is crucial in terms of our security and also enhancing a stress-free life. So I don't know how that looked like for you in 2024, but 2025 is a year of new beginnings. So let's look at some goals that we can set, some realistic financial goals for 2025. So for younger women, I think it's important that we could look at savings. Are you someone that you need to start building a saving habit as opposed to spending and spending and spending all the time? This year could look a bit much different. Even if it's a small amount, put something away every month for keepsake. So you can have something that builds up, and there could be an emergency, a challenging situation could pop up. Maybe not for you, maybe for a family member. Maybe an unforeseen situation. And if you've kept something aside, then the tendency to reach out or reach in and use some form of resource instead of now going borrowing or getting a loan, that would be something you need to look at, and that could be helpful for you. And it could also mean like educating yourself about how do I budget? How can I invest? How can I save, right? To manage the income flow. I know for those of us that are working, and to also reduce our debt, right? So what are the things I need to stop subscriptions for? Or am I having 5 or 6 subscriptions instead of having just one for the same item? These are things that we really need to kind of, it's not so exaggerated if we kind of break it into smaller components by looking at our lives and like, okay, what is working, what is not working, and what can I do differently? So a goal could be managing finances carefully as you work. So this year, like exploring maybe a course for financial literacy, like learning more and just doing that extra work to be much more aware. So that's something that I think would be helpful for us as younger women for 2025. So, think about it, but don't think too long, because putting it into action, it's what really matters. Now, for some of us as older or elderly women on our podcast today, if you're still working, you're able to work, and maybe right now you're not, you could explore part-time work opportunities or gigs, that you could engage in to manage the financial commitments, and maybe support your children or support your spouse, and look for something that you could do to generate income and support the family. Of course, nothing too strenuous, but a little goes a long way. And for those of us that are also elderly and maybe we're unable to work anymore, or we're retired, right? How do we manage what we have, right? Preserving our wealth, ensuring, we have a comfortable retirement, and we don't, fall into wrong schemes and just completely lose everything in a day, in a few seconds. Because sometimes you hear of people that, get into fraudulent schemes and everything just disappears, right? So how can we plan for estate management and our legacy commitments could be a goal for 2025. And obviously that's something you cannot do alone. So get a trusted person, and that could be in the form of a fund or wealth manager to sit down with you and look at your wealth or investments and help you manage the distribution of it, right? So while you're still alive, how do you want to manage your wealth? How do you want to keep something for NGOs, or you're looking at helping, children with cancer? You want to diverge a sort of income from that to that. If that's something you're looking forward to, you need to plan for it. If you have grandkids or children, and you need to figure out who gets what, right? So a wealth or fund manager helps you to be able to carefully consider and make those decisions while you're still alive, so that when you're gone, that wealth is properly deployed or managed. And those options, could include you also being a bit more financially literate, so you can make those decisions that would last for generations to come. So that could be a goal for some of us who are elderly on the call that we need to start working on. If you have a land somewhere, do you have papers? Do you have a lawyer? Look for ways that you have kept money somewhere, and you don't want to die and have the bank account or account manager, with all due respect to account managers, kind of deploy that money somewhere else if there's nobody coming to claim it. So these are things we need to think ahead in terms of what do we have, and how can we be much more open and transparent? But more importantly, how can we manage those funds in a way that we are taking care of our loved ones or the generations to come long after we're gone? So if that's a goal for 2025, then I think you need to don't delay, and you need to get at it and make it work for 2025. So from a financial goal perspective, I hope those insights or those goals have been helpful. And if they are, then you could rewind and listen in again, make some notes, and decide on what goal you'd like to go ahead with for the year and make it happen. Okay? So let's move on to our last goal for today's podcast. And this is with regards to spiritual goals, right? Your spiritual well-being. And sometimes some of us refer to it as, religious goals. So whether they're religious or spiritual goals, there is a sense of peace and purpose that being more spiritually aware brings to our lives as women. Being more spiritually empowered brings to our lives as women. So let me share some ways to cultivate spiritual well-being. And for us as younger women in 2025, I think we can explore spiritual practices that resonate with our beliefs. For those of us of the Christian faith, we could engage in Bible plans for the year with somebody else, not just on our own. We could engage a study partner, maybe one other person, two other persons, a close group of people, so that we make our study relational and more impactful. And in that group, we are able to share more experiences and just enhance our spirituality. And we could also join groups like fellowship groups, church members, that way we get to be accountable. We get to be held accountable. We get to stay accountable to the goals of reading maybe the Bible for the year. And I think another benefit that comes along with doing that is that you get people checking in on you, when life gives you a curveball or you're going through difficult challenges or situations, there's no room for joy in your moments. You get people that could hold your hands through those difficult times and give you a reason to look forward to the next day. So I guess the objective here is not to isolate, right? So we're looking for ways to engage in a way that we're enhancing our spirituality. I think that's a goal to look forward to in 2025. So if you've stayed away in 2024, you've isolated yourself, this year, it's a year that you can turn things, differently, look at a different perspective. Don't isolate yourself from community of believers of the faith, join a community where you can be more spiritually connected, where you can experience that sense of peace, that sense of rest and well-being. It's good for you. It's good for me. So another goal would be to stay prayerful. There's one thing to be connected in a community, but there's another thing to be able to meditate, to practice meditation in a way that we can, feel that inner sense of peace and connect with our souls and connect with our inner self, right? So look for ways to practice mindfulness and meditation to enhance your spirituality more in 2025. And for us as older women, the fruit is not far from the tree, right? There's similar ways we can apply these spiritual goals to ourselves as well, right? So let's try to reflect on our life experiences and proactively plan to build a legacy. I talked about how do we bridge the gap with the future generation? Are we sharing? What are we doing to enhance the generation behind us, or the generation that would definitely replace us? What are we doing for those coming after us? How are we setting up a legacy to make sure that we are giving of ourselves? We're building them up. And it doesn't have to be that you have a child. You may not have a child. You could look for ways to engage in community service, find peace and fulfillment psychologically and uplift, obviously, your sense of spirituality. So do you sign up for a class, where you get to connect with groups of women or people within your age bracket, if that's something that resonates with you? And just look at ways to try and enhance your inner peace this year. So that could be something that you could actively plan for and do. And another goal would be to focus, obviously, I talked about that for younger women. It goes without saying. For older women, how do we engage in spiritual practices in a community, right? And sometimes it could be joining groups on Zoom calls, if it's for older women, or we're comfortable more with people within our age bracket. How do we get around to pray and, just hear opinions so that we can solve life problems, together, help each other find that inner peace and contentment through meditation, through prayers, through reflecting with others as well. So, look for what works for you, but more importantly, starting off is, a part to the improvement we've all been talking about. As we've shared one goal to the other, you need to start from somewhere. So with regards to our spiritual or religious goals, I hope this helps. I hope these goals have kind of reshaped the way of how you've been looking at those goals previously. And I hope it's just giving you more perspective in terms of it doesn't have to be complicated. There's simple ways to bring more joy to our lives every single day. So we become more rounded and balanced women. So I trust this has been helpful as we've looked at, professional goals or self-improvement, as we've looked at health goals or physical well-being, as we've looked at mental, emotional goals, as we've also looked at relationship or social goals, as we've talked about financial goals, and obviously as we've talked about our spiritual goals. So look at each component and areas where you can evolve or do better for 2025. There's always one or two things you can either improve on or enhance, or you can start doing. Focus on one or two. Plan a goal for every month if that's something that's realistic for you to do, or spread it for every 3 months. So every quarter, go back to, those goals, see how you're doing. You could make it biannual. So by the end of June, at the end of the year, how well did you do with those goals in terms of the goals that you've set for yourself? You want to understand if you achieved this, if you achieved that. If you didn't completely get there, at least you made some progress. And I think what's also important is getting a partner or buddy to work with through those goals. Because, like I said, we're human beings, we're relational, we're not meant to be alone, we're not meant to be isolated. When you get somebody that you trust that have similar interests, that you can work together or partner together, you find out that the momentum and the zeal to be able even want to drive and see those goals to fruition is much more enhanced. So try and get a community where you have relatable interests and you can work together to achieve some of the goals that we've mentioned. So at the end of the year, at the end of the month, at the end of the week, at the end of the day, we have something to look forward to. We're able to reflect upon it. We're able to say, you know what? I did me good in 2025. And that's really the purpose of our episode for today. So that when we get to the end of the year, you can tell yourself, you can look in the mirror, or you could share this good news to say, look at what I achieved. Look at what I did. And again, remember, it doesn't have to be complicated. Let's make it good. Let's make it fun. Let's speak up more. Let's make it better. Let us be more communal and relational. Let's commit to having a group of ladies that we can trust, that, can support us. But more importantly, let's look at even how can we support others? Who can you mentor this year? Who can you help hold their hands? Who can you pray with more? Who can you help make them a better version of themselves? Remember as well to look under this video or audio podcast for links on goal templates to use. I've inserted some links to some templates that could be helpful, right? For setting goals for yourself for 2025. And remember, when it's not written, it's not measured, right? So let's not keep it in our heads. So keep everything in our heads. Let's write them down. So choose a template that works for you. It doesn't have to be complicated. Something simple, and you can measure as it works for you, whether monthly, whether every other month, whether quarterly, whether, biannually. Set something, do something, write something down. So I hope this has been helpful. Thank you. Thank you once again for joining us on this episode. This is our second episode for the year, but I think it's the episode worth relating to, because this is an episode that would help us set realistic goals for 2025. So it's one episode you want to keep close to your chest, and I hope it's been extremely helpful for you. Again, remember, every step forward, no matter how small, is a step towards a better you. So stay tuned for more episodes on living your best lives. Until next time, when we meet again, stay empowered and remember to empower her.